extremely excited to be part of this event with Terminal, and I would like to welcome Mike and Luke. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, but I'm Vero. I'm the head of talent at 8VC. We're a venture capital firm founded in 2012, now headquartered in Austin. We have over 5.5 billion under management, and we support over 300 portfolio companies, and the core buckets that we like to invest in are bio IT, fintech, smart enterprise, consumer healthcare, and logistics supply chain. But we're a big team of three at ABC on the talent team, and again, super excited to partner with Mike and Luke. So I'm going to pass it over to Luke for his intro.
Hello, world. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever it is for you. So my name's Luke, and I'm a talent partner at Lightspeed. We've been around a little bit longer than 8VC, so I think it's our 22nd year. We invest all over the world in pretty much every sector, from very first checks all the way up to happy pre-IPO rounds. And I spend my time working with our founders from day one to set up all of their kind of recruiting, people, hiring infrastructure. And then as they grow and scale globally, advise them and help them build a global recruiting engine. And so lots and lots of conversations on how do you get engineers from all over the world to join teams that start with just a couple people and a small idea somewhere in the US. It is worth noting that we also have a Lightspeed India, Israel, and China offices. So there's lots of global lessons that we can share in the session. But really looking forward to chatting with everybody.
Great, thank you, Luke. Mike?
Hello, everyone. Nice to be able to spend some time with you all. I lead our recruiting team at Embark Trucks. Embark Trucks is a company, a couple hundred people. We're building self-driving vehicles. Our CTO and co-founder, I believe, kicked off today's sessions, and so maybe you heard from him earlier in the day. I lead our recruiting efforts. I've been at the company now for 5 years, so a dozen of us in a garage through an IPO. And before that, I worked at a company called Shopify. Was also with them from a couple hundred people through an IPO to a couple thousand. And so have gotten to see what scaling teams looks like at a bunch of different sizes.
Great. Thank you, Mike. It's nice to see that, I think between the three of us, we've done from the really early stage to, scaling companies, and we all work very closely with founders. So, all right. So I would love to kick this off. So Luke, I'm going to throw this question over to you. So when we think about like junior or recent talent software engineers, how would you say that they can best gain skills or kind of way to showcase what they're capable of when they enter the market?
Sure. So I'll start with giving a little context on what's happened in the last couple of years. So I first joined Lightspeed about 8 years ago. The last 2 years obviously have been heavily COVID impacted. We just did a survey of a bunch of startups, and we found that prior to COVID, only 37% of our companies had any remote jobs. Now it's 95%. So it's a really good time to both be an engineer and to be an engineer that's not in one of these traditional hubs, because all of our companies are having a really challenging time scaling their teams fast enough to build the product that they need to sell. So if you are in a region that is not traditionally thought of as a tech hub, no worries. Everybody is having to learn how do you find people outside of the traditional areas. I think the same rules would really apply. Is you need to make it easy to find you, and you need to make it very clear what you do and where you have experience. That will mean something different for each of you. I'd recommend start by thinking, why does a company hire? They either have a skill or capacity gap to build. Then figure out what skill or capacity are they looking for, and frame your experience, your project work, your school work, your different interests in the lens of I am solving your problem company. And so we can get more into deeper into this. That is things around nobody can stop you from building your own mobile app, contributing to an open source project, adding, contributing to GitHub repos. There's many ways that you can showcase experience, but everything should be through the lens of what do companies need and how am I solving their pain.
Awesome. And Mike, so from your experience as well, even prior to now at Shopify, I know they were hiring interns. So how would you say, like, outside of the co-op programs, or would you as a recruiter value someone that comes in with experience, having done internship or doing co-op programs, co-op in Canada, internship in the US?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'll echo a lot of the stuff that Luke just said. We've seen sort of the market change in the last 2 years, going from hiring, locally from where our office was to opening things up across North America. And so you don't have to sort of be constrained to just the city you're in. Absolutely value co-op programs and getting internships, or being able to showcase, early in your career, being able to showcase projects and work that you've been able to do, whether that's part of an official co-op program or whether that's you taking on initiatives on your own. Contributing to open source projects, I know is a very popular way to kind of stand out. I'd say another one that we've recruited a lot from recently, especially for sort of more junior or entry level roles, is through various meetup groups. And I'd say one of the sort of silver linings of everything over the last 2 years is that a lot of the meetup groups have gone remote. And so being able to get and embed yourself in different meetups or groups that are probably now hosting things virtually, you can sort of get access to a lot of different companies that you might not normally have seen, or different networks, more importantly. And so we've had a lot of success going through those programs, co-ops and internships, of course, and finding people off open source projects as well.
Awesome. Do you have like example of open source projects or open source platforms that these engineers can contribute to?
Yeah, my answer is probably very tailored to my industry, and so we're in the self-driving space, and so we're targeting a lot of different robotics meetups. We target a lot of some of the machine learning and AI tooling that's available and out there, and so people, we find people that go and take that and go and apply it because they want to build a personal project that's identifying when dogs are walking in front of their house, things like that, and so. Following the things that you're interested in, there's usually a project out there that'll align.
Great, thank you.
A couple other thoughts I'll throw in around the open source topic. So there's a thing called the Apache Foundation, and they are the nonprofit organization that sits on top of maybe 400 projects, something like that. They oftentimes list the companies using them, the key contributors and project founders, and you can use that to jumpstart where should I. If I'm particularly interested in Hadoop or new streaming technology, you can get a list of companies that are using it in production from Apache Foundation, and then direct you to people that you might even be able to target. We've also seen companies that have used hackathons and the top teams and the winners of them as another way to find interesting, maybe less easily discovered candidates. So if there is a hackathon that you are passionate about, just get involved and start working.
That's great. Maybe we should put in the comment this Apache open source projects that engineers can contribute to. So whoever's managing.
You can also look by on GitHub what projects have the most stars, which is kind of a vanity metric of just likes, but you can filter by who has the most stars, which essentially means companies that are starring it are using it in production probably. So you can filter that way as well.
That's great. You're sharing your secrets of recruiting. Awesome. So Luke, back to you again. When we think of engineers that maybe come from like a non-traditional background, perhaps they were doing something else and they went through like a boot camp program instead of like a computer science degree. Any recommendation there on how they can be discovered or how they can actually look for opportunities?
Yeah, so I'll break it into two parts. So there's people finding you, and then there's you finding people in companies. So in the people finding you, Terminal, of course, their job is to curate networks of folks that you wouldn't otherwise meet. And so you get an implicit stamp from them saying this is a good person you should meet. So that's very helpful. You should create a very detailed LinkedIn profile, particularly around keywords that are key technologies companies will look for, the vast majority of international recruiting is still done through LinkedIn profiles. So make it very simple for recruiters to find you. Don't just say engineer at X bootcamp, list all the projects and technologies you used. And like we mentioned, commit to GitHub repos, answer questions on Stack Overflow is another website, which is just like a PDF for software development questions. They just published a report that shows their biggest spikes in usage are when people are interviewing for jobs, because you want to come up as being very active. So
Right.
if you're looking for a role, be active on Stack Overflow as well.
And I think, Luke, I remember you and I talking, and you were commenting on making sure that they don't get intimidated by the job requirements when they look at a job description. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Sure, and that'll transition me into you finding companies. So you want to be as visible as possible so that passively somebody finds you. If that doesn't work, which is totally reasonable, you need to find companies. So go to job boards. AngelList is a great one for startups. LinkedIn, again, used commonly. There's a ton of them for remote work. We work remotely and a bunch of others. Don't be scared by the requirements, because nobody in the world has ever written a job description from scratch. They just take other ones, copy and paste them together, put them out. So there's going to be it'll be an entry-level job that says you need 3 years of experience and a bunch of different technologies. That's just because they're just pasting something. So over-apply to things. You don't have to be qualified for everything it lists. Many times those are just lazy job descriptions.
Awesome.
You agree with that, Mike? I don't know if you run into that a bunch.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things that you can do even on some of the applications is if you're going to apply for a job, some of the most basic stuff is just making sure all job applications have a little box for a little bit of extra info. Just add a couple sentences of why you're trying to apply to that job in particular. Doesn't take too much effort, but it's a little bit extra. And you can also find the recruiters through these companies online, and recruiters are happy to have people reach out to them or answer questions or sort of be a foot in the door for you for roles.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, go ahead, Vera.
One thing that I like to recommend as well is the companies that you're interested in, start following them as well. So it shows you level of interest in what they're doing, and you can also mention, capture some information and highlight that when you're interviewing. Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Oh yeah, so I was going to give a practical LinkedIn tip. So if you go to a company's website or a company's page on LinkedIn and go to About, it has a whole section that shows where they're from, what schools did they go to, what skill sets do they have, and it just breaks it down by demographics. So you can do your own sourcing where you look for people that went through programs similar to yours. Where are they working now? If they've already hired people like you, great sign that they probably are open to more. You can also, to Vera's point, you can find people that work at the company. If it's an early stage one, a founder is really active and passionate about a certain project or technology, reach out to them with a customized note highlighting your work with a really specific, and I'd love to meet you and talk about roles on the team. Go to venture job portals where you can venture websites. You can filter by geo, by sector. These are just ways to get you ideas, but don't be passive in this. Do lots and lots of cold outreach. Send 100 people an email instead of one, and you'll be shocked at how many people will answer if you make it customized and tailored to them and really clear what you want.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. So Mike, you touched a little bit on how can someone stand out during their application. What about during the interview process? What matters to you as a recruiter, but also the hiring managers and the technical leaders?
Yeah. So you can do prep for interviews, and you should be prepping for each company a little bit differently, based on the company, based on the seniority of the role, based on what you're applying for. And there's two sort of things that I would recommend. One is to actually just ask your recruiter. You can ask them for what are the interviews that are going to be coming up? What are the technical questions? What's the format? So that way you can be properly prepared and properly showcase what they're looking for and what you've been doing. And so that's one, which is just don't be afraid to ask questions just to get more info. And then the second one is also that a lot of this stuff is available if you Google around. And so you can search for companies, you can search for, their interview formats and what they've been doing for types of questions. So that way you can be prepared. That's definitely one way to stand out. Making sure that you do a little bit of research, like presumably you've once you're starting to interview, there's probably some level of interest in the company. You should do a little bit of research. You should know what they're doing. You should come with thoughtful questions. And all these little things, probably when I'm saying them, seem very minor, but when you add them together, it actually builds a profile that stands out from a lot of other people. And I would say especially more so earlier in your career, where you may not have a giant 10-year track record to kind of point to. All of these little things show interest, show that you care a lot about what you're doing and care a lot about what you're going to be working on. And when you're actually interviewing, will help you to stand out.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you both agree with that, but what I like to suggest to the candidates is, as they go through the interview process, is not to think about, do they have to make a decision now on accepting an offer or not, but their goal is to make it to the next round, and then from there to the next round. So to really focus on, the now and hoping that they can continue through the process.
I would agree, and I think the saying is not getting too far ahead of your skis. Maybe I don't know if that's just a Canadian saying, but yeah, not getting too far ahead. And you probably have a few different companies that you've lined up that you're going through processes on. You can not get too worried about sort of where you're at in the process. Let them kind of take you through.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, great. So now They've got a great job. Luke, what's the career path? But most importantly, what's your thought? Do you recommend them to gain experience at a startup?
So startups, it's worth segmenting. There are really small ones that are a few people that have a great plus of you get to work on foundational company building and technology, and you get to touch really meaningful parts of the business. The downside is it's complete chaos and there's no mentorship, there's no onboarding, there's no training. And so figuring out based on your skill set and interest, what is the best version of a startup for you? There's companies that have been private for 10 years that are thousands of people that are also technically a startup. Generally speaking, if you're earlier in your career, the most important thing is often picking somebody that is a good manager that's going to invest time in your career. I understand if you're just moving into technology and this is, any role is a good first step, then you might change your calculation. But assuming you have multiple companies you could join, I would really screen heavily on, not necessarily because startups are terrible at most stuff and when it comes to people development. So not necessarily what's the company's approach, but who are you going to work for and who have they developed in the past? What have they gone on to do? How will they spend time with you? And that first role should be setting you up for whatever you think your next one might be. And your plan's going to change. You're going to meet other people. You might decide I want to go into product instead of engineering. Don't worry about over planning your career, but work with people who care about your success. And then, just come to everything you do with enthusiasm, and you'll learn a bunch. So within that category, you can either go individual contributor route or manager route. But if you're just starting off, it's all just getting through the different levels of engineering. That usually there's 6, most junior to most senior.
Yeah, and Mike, so from your experience, what type of opportunity have you seen like junior to mid-level engineers joining a startup?
Yeah, a lot. So I think, at the surface level, if you're just sort of starting your career, you're sort of looking out there and you're saying, hey, I see a bunch of software roles. And there is a giant bucket of roles that are sort of available right after that first entry level software role will suddenly open the floodgates and say, hey, I can go become a technical product manager. I can get into data science, infrastructure, AI, ML, sort of the front end stuff. And so there's a sort of a long list of how people end up sort of tailoring their career. And, at the outset, you may not know what you want to do, and that's totally fine. This is probably why I am biased towards startups. And, maybe it's just my track record, but I think they're an amazing accelerant to somebody's career to be able to come into a space that is going to be growing rapidly. All these new areas are going to open up. You're going to have opportunities to probably work in areas of engineering and software that you wouldn't otherwise get exposure to. And so, even mid-level of your career where you're still sort of growing, it's an opportunity to kind of pick up new skill sets, work in other areas. But I would echo Luke's point that on top of all of that, you absolutely need to find, even at small companies, even at startups, you can find great mentors, great leaders, people to learn from. And you kind of combine both of those, the strong leader, strong mentor, plus the sort of the open field of startup. And you can really, in my opinion, I think, sort of add a lot of fuel to the fire for accelerating your career.
One practical place to look to if you're wondering, well, yeah, there's all these different levels of engineer. What does it mean when we keep saying that? So just to throw out another website, there's a thing called progression.fyi, and it's an open source repository of hundreds of companies' internal career ladders. And it very detailed broken down into a level 1 does this, a level 2 does this, all the way up to their most senior. So you can, and they have them for engineering, design, product. So you can just start looking through and seeing, how does Reddit think about career progression versus Patreon, and where's my skill compared to the way they describe these roles? It's the internal side of essentially a job description. So that's how they make their own decisions on, Vero's a level 5, Luke's more experienced, but he's really a level 2 because he doesn't know how to do anything. So take a look at that, progression.fyi.
If I can jump in there and add maybe it's the cousin to progression.fyi, but it's levels.fyi, which is that exact thing, but the compensation component of it. If that's a helpful sort of tool.
It's a good way, Mike, to cue in the next topic, equity. I remember, Luke, you and I having this conversation. Actually, you provided training on how to discuss equity with candidates. So how important is it to negotiate equity?
Very, because when it works, it's extremely meaningful. And so the really common in the US, and particularly in startup hubs, is startup compensation is base salary, whatever benefits you get, and then equity. There's rarely any bonus structure because there's not metrics you can measure against, and it's a very few components. There's a perception that internationally people don't value it as much, and so some companies will either just think, well, I just won't offer it if nobody cares, or they will have a discounted rate for international teams. I think as you're adding really meaningful value to a company, if they then have a successful exit in terms of acquired or having an IPO, this can be very life-changing money for you and your family. So, in all things, always negotiate. There's nothing wrong with coming back and saying, I looked at my own data sources and actually, 10% more equity is in line with our market. There's nothing wrong with asking once. I wouldn't go back multiple times, but really any offer you get, counter once.
Sure, all the recruiters are going to love to hear that. Awesome. Mike, anything to add on the equity part? Or
yeah, I don't want to echo too many of Luke's points, but I'm going to echo Luke again and just say that I think equity, especially if you're joining any tech company, it should be a meaningful part of your compensation, and you should definitely spend time to understand it. Different stages of companies, they might offer you options, they might offer you RSUs. There's different implications, and sort of understanding how to value the equity and understanding the growth story behind the company is very important, and you should spend time researching that and looking into that to make sure you fully understand the compensation that you're getting. You can't, after a successful exit, you can't go back and renegotiate that initial grant that you got of your equity. And so it is important to do that up front. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I think I've, at this point in my career, I've probably talked with a few thousand engineers, and no matter where they are in their career, I'll still get all kinds of different levels of complexity of equity questions. And so don't ever be shy about asking for more details, for more information, the valuation, any of the core data points that you need to properly evaluate the offer. But you should absolutely, if you're going to join an early stage company that's not IPO, you probably have some faith in the company, which means that you probably want to have equity be a meaningful part of your comp. Again, there's a bias in me given my track record, but I would echo what Luke said with making sure that it's a part of your conversation.
Super. Can't believe we're almost at times. Any final remarks or recommendation, suggestion that we could provide to our engineers on this call?
I might say, if you're somebody on the call that is in the beginning part of their career, coming from a non-traditional background, just believe in yourself a little bit more than you are now. And whenever you're interviewing with people, especially at startups, everybody is context switching really frequently. They're just learning their own roles. They're tackling 1,000 projects. So nobody knows what they're doing. And that's a good thing, because if you prepare and you show up with a base of knowledge about the company, customer use cases, the product, you've really showcased the work that you do, you have just as good of a chance of finding a great role as anybody else. So push yourself to reach out to more people cold without an intro than you would. Whatever you were thinking, triple it. Apply to more companies than you think you should, and use them all as practices. So don't get discouraged if it takes a little while. The first role is the hard one, and then they all come after that.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, we're at times. It was really lovely to be part of this. I think I speak on behalf of Mike and Luke. Really grateful that we had this opportunity. So thank you to everyone who attended, who registered for this event. Thank you, Terminal, for having us. I'm going to pass it over to Nabil, who will be wrapping things up.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you, Vero, and thank you, Luke and Mike, for an amazing session. A big thank you to all 18 speakers for taking the time to connect and share their perspectives at our event today.